Please, going live now, Prabhu. So we can start whenever you're ready, Prabhuji.
Could you make me as co-host also, or
Sure, Prabhuji. Yeah, I can make you.
I can share the screen also?
Yeah, Prabhu, I can make you the host as well, Prabhu, if you don't mind. Yes, Prabhu, you are the co-host as well.
Okay. We will start with the Mangalacharan prayers, and then we will proceed with the discussion. So we will start with the Mangalacharan prayers first. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha Namahum Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So, welcome everybody to the Sunday program class. And today is the Sunday program that is preceding the Sunday, the Janmashtami festival, the most important Vaishnava festival that we all celebrate, the appearance of Lord Shri Krishna, which is on Tuesday, 11th of August. So today is the 9th of August, and I thought of speaking about the advent of Lord Shri Krishna. And there is a very nice verse in the Srimad Bhagavad Gita that I thought will be nice to use for the discussion. So the verse that I wanted to go over is verse number chapter 4, verse 6. So, should I display the verse as well on the screen, or is that maybe I should?
Maybe you can share, Prabhu.
Yeah.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Is it sharing?
Yes, Prabhuji, we can see the sharing, Prabhu.
So we will recite this verse, read the translation, the purport, portions of the purport. It's a very long purport, or almost the whole one, the whole purport, and then speak something from Srimad Bhagavatam as well. So the verse 4.6 from Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Ajopi san avyayatma bhutanam ishvaropi san prakritim swam adhisthaya sambhavami atmamayaya. I'll repeat it a couple of more times and then maybe devotees can repeat if they would like. Ajopi san avyayatma bhutanam ishvaropi san prakritim swam adhisthaya sambhavami atmamayaya. Ajopi san avyayatma bhutanam ishvaropi san prakritim swam adhisthaya sambhavami atmamayaya. Would anybody like to repeat?
अजोऽपि सन् अव्ययात्मा भूतानाम् ईश्वरोऽपि सन् प्रकृतिं स्वाम् अधिष्ठाय सम्भवामि आत्ममायया.
अजोऽपि सन् अव्यात्मा भूतानाम् ईश्वरोऽपि सन् प्रकृतिं स्वम् अधिष्ठाय सम्भवामि आत्ममायया.
अजोऽपि सन् अव्ययात्मा भूतानाम् ईश्वरोऽपि सन् प्रकृतिं स्वम् अधिष्ठाय सम्भवामि आत्ममायया.
अजोऽपि सन् अव्ययात्मा भूतानामीश्वरोऽपि सन् प्रकृतिं स्वामधिष्ठाय सम्भवाम्यात्ममायया.
Wonderful. More devotees, maybe the Prabhujis. So many Matajis did such a wonderful job.
Ajopi san avyayatma bhutanam ishvaropi san prakritim swam adhishtaya sambhavami atmamaya.
Thank you, Shrikar.
Ajopi san avyatmaya bhutanam ishvaropi san prakritim swam adhisthaya sambhavami atmamayaya.
Ajopi san avyayatma bhutanam ishvaropi san prakritim swadhisthaya sambhavamyatma maya.
Thank you. Other devotees? Anybody else? Okay, we will. Anybody? Last call. Okay, we will proceed with the translation, word by word translation first. Ajaha, unborn. Api, although. Son, being so. Avyaya, without deterioration. Atma, body. Bhutanam, of all those who are born. Ishvara, the Supreme Lord. Api, although. Son, being so. Prakritim, in the transcendental form. Swam, of myself. Adhishthaya, being so situated. Sambhavami, I do incarnate. Atma Mayaya, by my internal energy. Translation. Although I am unborn and my transcendental body never deteriorates, and although I am the Lord of all living entities, I still appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form. I'll repeat that once again. Although I am unborn and my transcendental body never deteriorates, and although I am the Lord of all living entities, I still appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form. So very, very important verse from the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. And this verse I personally like very much for the reason that this verse is clearly stating, Lord Krishna is saying to Arjuna, that I appear in my original transcendental form. Even though the Lord appears in the material world, he comes down from the spiritual world into the material world for our benefit, and the reasons for his appearance are given in the next two verses to establish dharma sansthapanarthaya, and yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati, so abhyuthanam adharmasya, to eradicate adharma and dharma sansthapanarthaya, to establish dharma, to annihilate the miscreants, vinashaya dushkritam, and paritranaya sadhunam. So these are the reasons why he comes to give pleasure to his devotees, to the sadhus, to destroy the miscreants and the demons, to abolish adharma and to establish dharma. These are the reasons why the Lord comes to the material world. But when he comes to the material world, he comes in his original transcendental form. He does not take a material body like we have. He comes in his own spiritual body. And that is the topic of today's discussion. And this verse is perhaps the most apt or the most applicable verse to that topic from the entire Bhagavad Gita. So we will read the purport now. Purport by His Divine Grace, Abhay Charnarvind Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So I'm going to read from the book, but I'll try to keep scrolling here so that devotees can see the purport. So Srila Prabhupada in this purport has very strongly and very clearly made the point and described to us that the Lord appears even though in the material world, but in his original transcendental form, which never deteriorates, in his spiritual body. He does not have a material body when he is present in the material world. It is possible. It's not that everybody in the material world has to have a material body. Srila Prabhupada has given this example so many times that in the prison house, there may be a lot of prisoners. So when a prisoner sees anybody else, he may think everybody that he's seeing is a prisoner. But that is not true. If the king decides to visit the prison and the king comes in to the prison, the prisoner may think, oh, this is another prisoner who is joining us. But that is not the case. The rules of the prison apply to the prisoner, but they don't apply to the king. The king can say, open this door, and the jailers or whoever are the employees of the prison will open the door. If the prisoner says, open this door, nobody will listen to the prisoner. So the rules of the prison apply to the prisoner, not to the king. It does not mean that everybody who is present in the prison has to be a prisoner, has to be called a prisoner. So in the same way, anybody who is in the material world does not have to have a material body. So when the Lord comes in the material world, it is not mandatory, it is not a requirement that he must adorn or he must wear a material body which suffers the same problems as the material body does. For example, the biggest problem of the material body is that it dies. It takes birth and it dies. There's a soul inside the material body, but the material body definitely dies. The soul is eternal, but the body definitely dies. And the body goes through deterioration, goes from young age to old age, deteriorates, has diseases, and all those things. Those do not apply to the body of the spiritual of the Lord, which is spiritual in nature. So all these points are very nicely described by Srila Prabhupada in this purport. So the purport. The Lord has spoken about the peculiarity of his birth. Although he may appear like an ordinary person, he remembers everything of his many, many past births. And the births is in a quote. So technically these births are incarnations or the avatars of the Lord. It does not mean that whenever the Lord incarnates and comes in various avatars, he takes on a material body. That's not the understanding. And that's why Srila Prabhupada has quoted it in this births in quotations. Whereas a common man cannot remember what he has done even a few hours before. If someone is asked what he did exactly at the same time one day earlier, it would be very difficult for a common man to answer immediately. He would surely have to dredge his memory to recall what he was doing exactly at the same time one day before. And yet, men often dare to claim to be God or Krishna. One should not be misled by such meaningless claims. Then again, the Lord explains his Prakriti, or his form. Prakriti means nature as well as Swarupa, or one's own form. The Lord says that he appears in his own body. He does not change his body as the common living entity changes body from one to another. So this is another important point that from this verse, very, very important point. This verse is very beautiful in the sense it tells really how the Lord appears in this world. It says, Prakritim Swam Adhishthaya. This third line, 4.6c as we call it, is very, very important. Prakritim Swam Adhishthaya. So some commentators who are foolish interpret it as Prakritim. He is coming under the influence of Prakriti, or the material nature. Prakriti does not always mean material nature. In the material sense, Prakriti is material nature. Here, Lord Krishna is not saying this is the Prakriti. He is saying Prakritim Swam, and also adding the word Adhishthaya. Adhishthaya means being situated in. So he is situated in his own Prakriti, Swam Adhishthaya. So he is, Swam means his own, and or myself. Lord Krishna is saying in my Prakriti. And we all understand that the Lord is spiritual. All those commentators who say this thing foolishly, that Lord Krishna had a material body, they know that God, the Supreme Lord, is somebody spiritual. He is beyond matter. But when he is taking the form of Lord Krishna, then he has a material body, because the word Prakritim is used. But they forget to interpret the word Swam Prakritim. Prakritim Swam, in his own nature, he is situated. And his own nature is spiritual. So when you combine the word Swam with Prakritim, it makes it very clear that it is in his original, or in his natural nature, natural Prakriti, which is spiritual in nature. He is situated in that Prakriti. And then he appears. Sambhavami means to appear or to incarnate, as Srila Prabhupada is. Sambhavami Atma Mayaya. And Srila Prabhupada will describe this. And then through his internal energy, his internal potency, he descends. How can somebody spiritual come into the material world just like that? Like a king, if he has to go into the prison, when the king arrives in the prison, by his position, by his authority, he orders the jailer, open the door, I want to come in. And the jailer will accept the orders of the king, will immediately open the door. So it is by the authority of the king that he can go wherever he wants. So he has to exercise that authority. That is Atma Maya. By exercising his internal energy, the Lord enters into the material world. He incarnates. Sambhavami Atma Maya. So very clearly it is described here, Prakritim Swam, in his original Prakriti, or in his original nature, which is spiritual. So we'll continue with the purport here. Sorry, let me display that part of the purport. Is the screen sharing working? Or?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay, fine. In Skype, which I use at work, whenever I share a screen, it draws like a border around that screen that it's being shared. Here, Zoom doesn't draw the border, so maybe they should add that feature. Anyway, the conditioned soul may have one kind of body in the present birth, but he has a different body in the next birth. In the material world, the living entity has no fixed body, but transmigrates from one body to another. However, the Lord, does not do so. I just want to make sure you're all on the same point. So where is this here? Yeah. The Lord, however, does not do so. So we are at that place. Whenever he appears, he does so in the same original body by his internal potency. In other words, Krishna appears in this material world in his original eternal form with two hands holding a flute. He appears exactly in his eternal body. uncontaminated by this material world. Although he appears in the same transcendental body and is Lord of the universe, it still appears that he takes birth like an ordinary living entity. And the important word here is it still appears. It appears that he takes birth like an ordinary living entity. And we will see a little later from the Srimad Bhagavatam what it means by it appears. And although his body does not deteriorate like a material body, it still appears that the Lord grows from childhood to boyhood and from boyhood to youth. But astonishingly enough, he never ages beyond youth. At the time of the battle of Kurukshetra, he had many grandchildren at home, or in other words, he had sufficiently aged by material calculations. Still, he just looked just like a young man, 20 or 25 years old. We never see a picture of Krishna in the old age because he never grows old like us. Though he is the oldest person in the whole creation, past, present, and future. Neither his body nor his intelligence ever deteriorates or changes. Therefore, it is clear that in spite of his being in the material world, he is the same unborn, eternal form of bliss and knowledge, changeless in his transcendental body and intelligence. So, very nicely, Srila Prabhupada is describing how Lord Krishna never ages beyond youth. And the reason why he has the aging visible from a young baby to a boy to youth is for his various pastimes to occur and for the devotees to relish those pastimes in all those ages till he becomes a youth. But beyond the youthful form, he never ages anymore. We'll skip some part of this purport and then we'll go towards the end in the Bhagavatam. So from here. In the Bhagavatam, he appears before his mother as Narayana with 4 hands and the decorations of the 6 kinds of full opulences. So this is when he's before his mother. This is being referred here. The reference is to Mother Devaki in the prison house where Lord Krishna was born, not Mother Yashoda. So there he took birth with his 4-armed form as Narayana. And we will see some of that from the Srimad Bhagavatam a little later. His appearance in his original eternal form is his causeless mercy bestowed upon the living entities so that they can concentrate on the Supreme Lord as he is and not on the mental concoctions or imaginations which the impersonalist wrongly thinks the Lord's forms to be. The word Maya or Atma Maya refers to the Lord's causeless mercy according to the Vishwakosha dictionary. The Lord is conscious of all his previous appearances and disappearances, but a common living entity forgets everything about his past body as soon as he gets another body. He is the Lord of all living entities because he performs wonderful and superhuman activities while he is on this earth. Therefore, the Lord is always the same absolute truth and is without differentiation between his form and self or between his quality and body. A question may now be raised as to why the Lord appears and disappears in this world. This is explained in the next verse. Like we discussed earlier, the reasons why he comes down to this earth for establishing dharma, for eradicating adharma, and so on. So this is the topic for today's class, that the Lord appears in this world in his original transcendental form. And let us look at some very, very, very beautiful verses from the Srimad Bhagavatam. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, the 10th canto is all about the appearance of the Lord. So the Lord appears So in chapter 3 of the 10th canto, so I'm showing this chapter 3 of the 10th canto, and specifically the Lord appears in the 8th verse. So the first 7 verses are preparations for the Lord's appearance. Before the Lord appears, the whole universe begins to celebrate. And everybody, as you can see here, this is an excerpt of the 6th verse. The Kinnaras and the Gandharvas began to sing auspicious songs. The Siddhas and Charanas offered auspicious prayers, and the Vidyadharis, along with the Apsaras, began to dance in jubilation. So the whole universe was beginning to rejoice and celebrate in the imminent appearance of the Lord. In the 8th verse, the Lord appears like a full moon. So we will read this 8th verse. So 7 and 8 is a combined verse. All the previous acharyas use a particular format of combining verses. And so Srila Prabhupada is obviously following all the same practices as the previous acharyas. And here, the 7th and 8th verse combined reads like this. I'll just go through the English translations. Some of them we'll go through in Sanskrit. The demigods and great saintly persons showered flowers in a joyous mood. So this is the 7th verse. Still the celebrations are going on. And the clouds gathered in the sky and very mildly thundered, making sounds like those of the ocean waves. Now the 8th verse is starting here. Then the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, who is situated in the core of everyone's heart, appeared from the heart of Devaki in the dense darkness of night, like the full moon rising on the eastern horizon, because Devaki was of the same category as Sri Krishna. So here, Lord Sri Krishna appears on the planet on this most auspicious day of Janmashtami. Sri Lord Krishna ki jai. So one very beautiful thing that I discovered on reading one of the commentaries by a great Acharya, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Here it says, Disha Indur Iva Pushkalaha. So Indur Iva Pushkalaha, or where is it here? Yeah, Indur Iva Pushkalaha. So Indu means the full moon. Indu Iva Pushkalaha, complete in every respect. So here it is saying, the verse is saying that, or Shukadev Goswami is saying that the Lord appeared as the full moon. So the full moon is in relation to the Lord Sri Krishna. But he also says that even though it was the Ashtami day, the 8th day of the moon, right? That's why we call it Janmashtami. The moon also was so jubilant, was so happy that on that day when Lord Krishna appeared, the moon swelled and became a full moon as well. So not only was the Lord appearing like a full moon, but the moon itself became full on that day. So very nice description given by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. And these are not poetic descriptions. A poet, is supposed to imagine things and write about things that he imagines or he sees in his visions. But the acharyas are able to actually, they all have transcendental vision, and they are actually able to see through their devotion, through their transcendence, what actually happened during the pastimes of Lord Sri Krishna. They have this, divine vision, just like Sanjaya. Even though he was sitting in the court of Dhritarashtra, he was given the vision by Vyasadeva to see what's going on in the battlefield. And that's how he was able to narrate it to Dhritarashtra, who was blind. In the same way, acharyas have this transcendental vision that they can see all the pastimes of the Lord as they happened so many years ago, and are able to share it with all of us through their writings. So this is not some kind of just imaginary poetry. Please don't take it in that sense. Then 9th and 10th verse is also combined. And very, very beautiful verse. I will just recite 9th verse. Is very, very, very sweet. I have not practiced reciting the 10th verse, but I have done some practice in reciting the 9th one. So I'll try to recite the 9th verse, which has some very nice aspects. So it goes like, Tam adbhutam balakam ambujakshenam chaturbhujam shankha gadadi udayudham Shri Vatsalakshmam galashobhi kaustubham pitambara sandra payoda shaubhagam. So the translation of this goes like this, that Vasudeva then saw the newborn child. So now he's a child. Remember who was born. First of all, he was born as a child, and we can see here it says tam adbhutam balakam. So he's not the original form of Lord Vishnu as we see in the sort of the adult form of Lord Vishnu. He is in the child form, but and that's why the word adbhutam is there. Means so wonderful or so unique, so it's kind of never seen before. Adbhuta. So adbhutam balakam. He was a child form, and then who had very wonderful lotus-like eyes, and who bore in his 4 arms the 4 weapons, Shankh, Chakra, Gada, Padma. So here also we can see it is written here, Chaturbhujam. He had 4 arms. So when the Lord originally appeared, Lord Krishna, we all know, has 2 arms in which he holds his flute and from which he steals butter and does all the other wonderful activities. We never see Lord Krishna in 4 arms. So Chaturbhujam is referring definitely to the Lord Vishnu or Narayana form. And Shankh, Gada, Adi, Udayudham. Udayudham means all the other weapons. So Shankh, Gada. So we can see here Srila Prabhupada is translating it as Shankh, Chakra, Gada, Padma. So that is what he is holding in his 4 hands. Shankh, Gada, Adi. Adi means etc. And then Srivatsa Laksham. So he has the Srivatsa on his neck, the Srivatsa symbol on his neck. And he has the Kaustubha jewel. He's wearing Pitambara. He's wearing the yellow garments. Now, what kind of child is born wearing garments? Child is usually born, naked. But he is wearing the Pitambara, the yellow garments. And so such a wonderful form is the one that takes birth, and Vasudeva and Devaki are completely astonished. So we'll continue the reading of the translation. And who bore in his 4 hands the 4 weapons, Shankh, Chakra, Gada, Padma. On his chest was the mark of Srivatsa, and on his neck the brilliant Kaustubha gem. Dressed in yellow, his body blackish and like a dense cloud, his scattered hair fully grown. So this is that Shriva Laksham. Laksham means his hair. And hair are also fully grown. And his helmet and earrings sparkling uncommonly with the valuable gem Vaidurya. The child decorated with brilliant belt, armlets, bangles, and other ornaments appeared very, very wonderful. So this is describing what Vasudeva and Devaki are seeing on the appearance of the Lord. So then, one of the questions could be that why did the Lord not appear as just Lord Krishna? Why did he appear in this 4-armed form as Lord Vishnu? And we will cover that aspect a little later in one of the future verses, but Srila Prabhupada has given an absolutely wonderful description of why the Lord appeared in this form first. And so many beautiful things are there in this verse. Another thing that was pointed was that it says here, Vasudeva then saw the newborn child like this. So Sanatan Goswami asks the question in his Brihad Vaishnava Toshini that how is it possible? So imagine, Devaki and Vasudeva were in a prison house when Lord Krishna was born. Everybody knows that pastime so well. Kamsa had imprisoned them because there was this Akashvani that the 8th child of Devaki will be the cause of death of Kamsa. So he imprisoned Kamsa, Devaki and Vasudev, who was his sister. Devaki was Kamsa's sister. And even though she was his sister, he imprisoned both of them so that he could kill all the children that were born. So in a prison house, there is no light. He wouldn't, waste his, there was no electricity, of course, at that time, but there was not supposed to be any light in the prison house. So how could Devaki and Vasudev see this child in the darkness, in the dens of darkness? How could they see the child? And the answer is that through the effulgence of the Lord, the Lord appeared. He's so bright, he's so effulgent, and all the light that is coming out, all the effulgence that is coming out of his body, that is the reason why Devaki and Vasudev were able to see the Lord and were able to pray to him and glorify him. So then we'll go into, so this was the 9th and 10th verse. In the 11th verse, there's a very nice thing that I wanted to point out. Again, really in relation to Adbhutam Balakam, the astonishment of Vasudev when he is seeing the child. Never before that kind of child has been seen fully clothed with long hair, the four-armed form, Vishnu form in a baby-like form, not the adult Vishnu form, but a baby-like Vishnu form. Never before such a form had been seen of Lord Vishnu. And here in this verse, in the purport, we will read a part of the purport, but the translation is that when Vasudev saw his extraordinary son, his eyes were struck with wonder. In transcendental jubilation, he mentally collected 10,000 cows and distributed them among the Brahmanas as a transcendental festival. So, of course, Vasudev was imprisoned, so he couldn't celebrate the birth of his beautiful son, but he celebrated it mentally. That is one point. That tells us that one of the things that this tells us, that nobody can stop our devotional service ever. Vasudeva and Devaki were in a completely imprisoned state. They had no freedom. They could not do anything, but their minds and their hearts were not imprisoned. The demons can imprison the body of others, of devotees, but they cannot imprison the hearts and the minds of their devotees. This is the difference between demons and the Lord. The Lord can completely imprison in a nice way, as in like capture the hearts and minds of their devotees. But demons cannot do that at all. So even though the body of anyone could be in the captivity of a demon, but their hearts and minds are always free to worship their beloved Lord. So please ever don't consider there are a lot of questions, that there is so much of frustration around us. There is all these things around us. But in our minds and hearts, at the very least, we can always worship the Lord. Just like Prahlad Maharaj, he was so much, in distress due to his own father, but in his mind and in his heart, he could as easily worship or as easily remember the Lord as he could if those impediments were not there. So anyway, so this is one point. But the other thing is that when Vasudeva saw his extraordinary son, his eyes were struck with wonder. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes 4 reasons why his eyes were struck with wonder. So where is that? Yeah. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada is giving credit to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. And this is another point, whenever we copy from somewhere, we should always give credit to there. We should acknowledge that, we have taken this from there. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, wherever Srila Prabhupada is taking anything, if he could have, removed this line, and everybody who said, wow, Srila Prabhupada has come up with these 4 reasons, first, second, third, fourth reason. This is not the quality of a devotee or acharya. We always give credit. I have seen some places where people, copy from Srila Prabhupada's books and purports and pass it off as their own, and never give even one credit to Srila Prabhupada. Nowhere in, there is even a mention of Srila Prabhupada. This is not okay. If you're copying is totally fine. It's actually encouraged so that you don't contaminate or twist and turn the message. But credit must be given to where it is deserved. And, so we must never take Prabhupada's purports or translations, copy them, and not give him credit or give it elsewhere or things like that. That's very offensive. One should never do that. So, and I have seen it happen. So, that's why I'm making the point. So here, he says, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has analyzed the wonder of Vasudev upon seeing his extraordinary child. And he says that the first wonder, I'll skip that. The first wonder was that the Lord was not afraid to appear within the prison house of Kamsa, where Vasudev and Devaki were interned. Second, although the Lord, the supreme transcendence, is all pervading, he had appeared from the womb of Devaki. How fortunate Devaki is that the Lord appeared from her womb. And the third point of wonder, therefore, was that a child could take birth from the womb so nicely decorated. This is the point I was making earlier. When the children are born, they don't take birth with all these opulences, with Shankh, Chakra, Gada, Padma, and with fully clothed in yellow garments and all that. So it's not that this is some kind of poetic imagination by Shukadev Goswami and he is narrating. This is, this actually happened, and Vasudev himself is awestruck. So this is not something that happened millions of years ago when, the world used to be different and, a child could be born with clothes. No, even then the children were born in naked without any clothes. And that is why Vasudev is so he is taken aback. And then the fourth reason is that the Supreme Personality of Godhead was Vasudev's worshipable deity, yet he had taken birth as his son. So Vasudev cannot understand how he is so lucky, how his wife Devaki is so lucky that the Lord is taking birth. So these are all the reasons why Vasudev is so awestruck that the Lord took birth. Now, the reason why the Lord took birth, this is one point that we had made earlier, why the Lord appeared as in the four-handed, in the Narayana or the Vishnu form. He could have appeared as Krishna, and and nobody else knew. It's not like Vasudev and Devaki went and announced it to everyone, because we know that Mother Yashoda and Nanda Maharaj did not know that their son is the Supreme Lord himself. They were completely oblivious. They were, as Srila Prabhupada says at some places, they were blissfully oblivious. They had no idea that their son is the Supreme Lord, even though Nanda Maharaj and Vasudev have met afterwards at few times. Vasudev never told Nanda Maharaj that your son is actually Lord Vishnu or Lord Narayana. So why is that? And actually they kept it secret. But so the Lord could have also kept this secret from Devaki and Vasudev. He could have just appeared as Krishna, and Vasudev and Devaki would have thought, okay, we have an 8th child, and whatever happens will happen, like with the first 7 children. So that is not the case, and we will see the reason. Srila Prabhupada, and only Acharyas can describe these reasons so beautifully. So this is in text number 44. So we will go down to text 44. Yeah. So here, Lord Krishna, or in his Lord Vishnu form, he's talking to Mother Devaki at this point. So he's saying to Mother Devaki, I have shown you this form of Vishnu just to remind you of my previous births. Otherwise, if I appeared like an ordinary human child, which means if I appeared like Krishna directly, you would not believe that the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu has indeed appeared. So to Devaki and Vasudev, he wanted to make sure that they know that it is the Supreme Lord who is appearing. And for that reason, he appeared in that way. The purport of Srila Prabhupada describes this in more detail, and I want to take this opportunity to read this purport. So purport goes like this. Purport by His Divine Grace Abhay Charnavind Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Devaki did not need to be reminded that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, had appeared as her son. She already accepted this. Nonetheless, she was anxious, thinking that if her neighbors heard that Lord Vishnu had appeared as her son, none of them would believe it. Therefore, she wanted Lord Vishnu to transform himself into a human child. So she was feeling a little, feeling like nobody would believe that a child was born to her that looked like Lord Vishnu. So she wanted him to look like a normal human child. On the other hand, the Supreme Lord was also anxious. So Devaki is anxious and the Supreme Lord is anxious. Both are anxious. The Supreme Lord is also anxious, thinking that if he appeared as an ordinary child, she would not believe that Lord Vishnu had appeared. Such are the dealings between the devotees and the Lord. So the Lord is anxious to do the best for his devotees. The devotees are anxious to do the best for the Lord. So both are trying to please each other. Such are the wonderful dealings between devotees and the Lord. The Lord deals with his devotees exactly like a human being, but this does not mean that the Lord is one of the human beings. For this is the conclusion of the non-devotees. Avajananti ma mudha manushim tanum ashritam. This is from Bhagavad Gita 9.11. That devotees know the Supreme Personality of Godhead under any circumstances. This is the difference between a devotee and a non-devotee. The Lord says, Man manah bhavamad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru. Engage your mind always in thinking of me. Become my devotee, offer obeisance, and worship me. A non-devotee cannot believe that simply by thinking of one person, one can achieve liberation from this material world and go back home, back to Godhead. So just by thinking of one person, who is that person? Lord, the Supreme Lord, Lord Krishna. If you think of him, you can go back to the the spiritual world. But they cannot understand this. But this is a fact. The Lord comes as a human being, and if one becomes attached to the Lord on the platform of loving service, one's promotion to the transcendental world is assured. So very nicely, Lord Krishna is telling Devaki and Vasudev here that if I appeared like a ordinary child, you would not realize that I am the Supreme Lord. And another part of the reason for this is that it's given in later parts of or earlier parts of the verses that Vasudev and Devaki had prayed for a very, very long time to have the Supreme Lord as his son. And the Lord said, I will not only be your son once, but I will be your son 3 times. So, he tripled their what their desire was. And this is the 3rd time when the Lord is appearing as the son of Devaki and Vasudev. The first was when he appeared as Prishni Garbha to Sutapa and Prishni, and then as Vaman Dev to Kashyapa Muni and Aditi, and finally as Lord Krishna himself to Devaki and Vasudev. So to them, the Lord wanted to show that he is the Supreme Lord, but not to anybody else. Then in the next verse, another very wonderful verse, then Lord Krishna says, both of you, husband and wife, constantly think of me as your son. So he is instructing Vasudeva and Devaki to think of him not as the Supreme Lord, as his son. So again, Devaki and Vasudeva were in the Vatsalya mood. They wanted to have the Lord as their son, and they got them 3 times, not once. So he tells them, and they did not remember. The Lord tells them, I had appeared as your son twice already. So he reminds them, and he's saying, now I am appearing 3rd time. And he's instructing them to continue to remember him as their son. But always know that I am the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By thus thinking of me constantly with love and affection, you will achieve the highest perfection, returning home back to Godhead. So very nicely, Lord Krishna is telling Devaki and Vasudev that just remember me as your son. And in that Vatsalya mood, Vatsalya means in the parental affection, in that Vatsalya mood, they will be able to remember the Supreme Lord. One nice point that Sanatana Goswami makes here is that this is Brahma Bhavena Chashakrit. So Brahma Bhavena, so Yuvam Mam Putra Bhavena, Yuvam Mam Putra Bhavena. So in the form of Putra Bhavena, this is the Vatsalya, in the Vatsalya mood, in the parental affection mood, remember me. Yuvam Mam Putra Bhavena, whom you knew earlier to be Brahma Bhavena earlier. And Srila Prabhupada is translating Brahma Bhavena is knowing that I am the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sanatana Goswami gives a slightly different understanding, that whom you earlier thought to be the Brahman, the Supreme Brahman. And he makes the point that this verse also shows the inferiority of the Brahman form to the personal Bhagwan form of the Lord. The Lord is present as Bhagwan, and he is saying, now you always think of me in this form, which earlier you used to think as the Brahman. So why would the Lord, if the Bhagwan form was inferior, why would the Lord ask Vasudeva and Devaki to think of something inferior? This clearly shows that the Bhagwan form, directly from the mouth of Lord Vishnu himself, he's saying that the Brahman form is inferior to the Bhagwan form. And he's asking them to remember him in the Bhagwan, in the Putra Bhagwan as a Putra, but still as a person. Putra Bhavena Brahma Bhavena Chashakrit. So Cha Askrit means to remember constantly. So that's another beautiful point that I came across in the commentary of Sri Sanatana Goswami in the Brihad Vaishnava Toshani. And finally, I'll go over quickly this verse. Shukadev Goswami said, after thus instructing his father and mother, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, remained silent. In their presence, by his internal energy, so again it comes by his internal energy, Bhagavan Atma Mayaya. If you see, this is the same Atma Mayaya that is used here in 4.6, which we were reading. Sambhavami Atma Mayaya. So same word Atma Mayaya is being used here as well as here. Bhagavan Atma Mayaya, out of his internal energy. So what happens in their presence? By his internal energy, he then transformed himself into a small human-like child, but like a human. Prakritaha Shishuhu. Babhuva Prakritaha Shishu. So like he transformed and became like an ordinary human being. Here Srila Prabhupada is saying like an ordinary human being. Shishu means child. So then he transformed himself into that. In other words, he transformed himself into his original form, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. So this is what Lord Krishna is doing. So Lord Krishna, when he transforms himself into the Krishna, into the form, this Prakritaha Shishu, is referring to that same Bhagavad Gita, Prakritim Swam Adhisthaya, in his Prakriti, not the Prakriti of the material nature, in his original form. And then he grows up again with his spiritual body and attains youthful and stays there. So that is what I wanted to cover today. So the summary of the whole discussion is that whenever the Lord appears in this material world, he is not having a material body. He does not be bound by the rules of the material nature, which means birth, old age, disease, and death. Those rules do not apply to the Lord. The Lord appears in this material world, but he appears in his own original transcendental form. Prakritim Swam Adhisthaya Sambhavami Atma Mayaya. Through his internal energy, he is able to appear. If he had to appear as a human being, there was no need to apply his internal energy. Everybody, so many billions and trillions and zillions of living entities are taking birth in this material world. there is no internal energy that is needed there. Why the Lord has to apply his internal energy to enter into the material world? All you have to do is have a desire to enjoy separately from Krishna, and then you will enter the material world. Just like for to enter the prison house, you can just commit a crime and enter the prison, the jail. You don't have to do anything. But when a king wants to enter the jail without committing a crime, then the king has to tell, he has to exert his authority, open the door, I want to go check what's happening in the jail, and the doors open for him. That is Atma Maya. So all this is showing that when the Lord appears in the material world, he appears in his transcendental form, he appears in his spiritual body. He does not appear in a material body which deteriorates, which ages, which gets disease, which dies. None of that happens. So here in this pastime, we saw this whole details and the intricacies of how the Lord appeared directly as a Vishnu form and then transformed himself into the Lord Krishna, two-handed form. Similarly, when he passes away in the Bhagavatam, there is a pastime that there is this hunter who shoots an arrow. So those are the external things to bewilder those who don't fully understand. Like somebody may say, oh, Krishna was born from the womb of Devaki, just like Krishna. So just like a human takes birth. But if you read the Bhagavatam in detail, you read the commentaries of the acharyas, you do all those things, then you understand the intricacies. That's why these are called confidential scriptures. These are very hard to understand the depths, and the meaning is not very easily available. One can easily misinterpret the meanings. So similarly, when Lord Krishna departs from this material world, it's not like his body died. There is deep understanding provided by the acharyas that he just ascends back to the spiritual world from this material world. So one should never consider the body of the Lord to be material. He appears in this world in a completely spiritual form. That was the point of today's class. I hope you found some value in it. And if I made any mistakes, please offer your corrections. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dhanyavad Pranam, Jai Srila Prabhupada. Can you hear me, Prabhuji?
Yes.
Thank you so much for an excellent lecture, Prabhuji. Excellent. I am not really amazed, Prabhuji. You have started with Lord's transcendental body. I mean, he whenever he appears in the material world, he comes with original spiritual body. And how you have taken us to the journey of Sri Krishna Janmashtami, kind of, the Lord's birth, and how very lot of insight is there, Prabhuji, and so many points you discussed, and it was so ecstatic to listen about your lecture, Prabhuji. Thank you so much for that. I have a question, Prabhuji, quick question.
All the mercy of the acharyas and Srila Prabhupada.
Yes, Prabhuji, thank you so much. And I have a question, Prabhuji. Can I ask?
Mm-hmm. Is it okay to ask a question, Jai Sachinandan Prabhuji, or?
Sure. I think the pujaris are ready, but sure, take the question.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jason Prabhuji. My only question is, Prabhuji, you were saying that, the Lord, whenever he comes to the spiritual, appears in his original transcendental body, then, but Devaki, originally he appeared as a four hands Vishnu form, to make sure that Devaki understands that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is born from her womb, because as they have a desire to get him as a son. But Prabhuji, even though if he takes birth as in a Krishna form, like a original form, like two-hand form, that is still to be understood by Devaki, right? Because it means that Devaki does not know about does Krishna's Swayam Bhagavan feature, or because he in the 46th verse you have mentioned, Prabhuji, here, in the last sentence, he transformed himself into his original form, Krishnastu Swayam Bhagavan. So the Bhagavan is two hands, Krishna is there. That is also his transcendental form. That is also his original form. And Devaki must have been understood if Lord takes birth, right?
So, yes. So this has also been explained very nicely. And this is an even deeper reason. I wanted to cover it if I had time, but the short answer is this. Since Aarti has started, I'll just be very brief. This has been explained by Srila Jiva Goswami also that's why the Lord Krishna's form as the Supreme Lord is more confidential, or is the most confidential and more confidential than Lord Vishnu. Many more people realize Lord Vishnu to be the spiritual uh, uh, Supreme Lord in his spiritual abode, but they consider Lord Krishna to be sort of the human form who has descended into the material world. So the fact that Lord Krishna is the original spiritual form, the complete, the most complete form of the absolute truth, Swayam Bhagavan, that is not known to many people. They and that is true even in my discussions with many people that I have. There is this big barrier in people's mind to accept Lord Krishna as that's at the same level as Lord Vishnu. And in our Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and in our Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, we say that Lord Krishna is even higher than is even more complete, demonstrates even more complete opulences than that of Lord Vishnu. So this is a very confidential aspect which is not known by many people, and only when one is completely surrendered to the acharyas, especially in our Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, one has to have that firm faith when this understanding is revealed. So many people do not have that understanding, and that is why, and that is probably the reason why the Lord appeared first in that form to Devaki and Vasudev, because they may not have had that understanding that Lord Krishna's form is the original absolute form, or the complete form of the absolute truth. That is my understanding.
Okay, Prabhuji, thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you, Parama Karuna Prabhu Das Prabhu ki jai.
Jai.
Thank you very much, Prabhu, for leading us into this upcoming week with Janmashtami, with the wonderful appearance of Lord Krishna. Shishanatai Sachanandan ki jai. So is somebody scheduled to chant the holy name for this arati? Is that you, Sanvi? You're supposed to chant?
Yeah, Prabhuji.
Okay, so please go ahead and start. They're showing darshan of Shishanatai Sachanandan. Thank you.
Krishna Krishna Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Krishna Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Titinani Namaste Saraswati Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Asya Jajashatani Namaste Saraswati Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Asya Jajashatani Jaya Shri Krishna Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Rama,
Thank you, Sanvi. Who signed up for Nrsingadev Aarti, because it started at 12:50. Is anybody signed up for that? If not, would somebody? I see that we can have everybody sing if you're not signed up.
I can sing, Prabhu. Nobody is.
Your echo. Multiple.
Yeah, Prabhu.
If you can turn off all but the one you're using and then chant, that'd be nice. Thank you.
Namaste Narasimhaya Prahaladaladaini Hiranyakashi Purvakshaha Shilatankanakalaye Ito Narsimho Parato Narsimho Yato Yamitato Narsimho Bahir Narsimho Hrudaye Narsimho Narasimhamadim Sharanam Prapadye Tava Kara Kamalavare Nakam Adbhuta Shringa Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanubringa Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Avakara Kamalavare Nakam Adbhuta Shringa Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanubringa Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jaya Narasimhadev 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 Jaya Narasimhadev Jaya Prahlad Maharaj Prahlad Maharaj Prahlad Maharaj Jaya Prahlad Maharaj Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada Jaya 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 Gurudev 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Shri Vigna Vinashak Lakshmi Narasimhadev Bhagavan ki jai भक्त शिरोमणि श्रील प्रहलाद महाराज की जय हरे नाम संकीर्तन यज्ञ की जय साम वेद भक्त वृंद की जय हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की जय निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल थैंक यू प्रभु जी
Thank you. Jagat Baru. Thank you. Jagat Baru. Prabhupada ki jai.
जय
Narottam Vilas Prabhu, would you like to show the poster for Janmashtami?